Greetings, everyone, through here. Welcome to the Demo Hub. Today, we have a fascinating guest. I'm excited to introduce you to Thibaud, the founder of Amphi. Thibaud, excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
That's awesome. I've invited many guests to the show, but you are unique because we've worked together.
We did, yeah. It's been a while. So
Yeah,
yeah, I worked at Talent for a while, and yeah, we worked together.
yeah. Before we jump in, where are you calling from? That's something we typically ask our guests.
Yeah, I'm based in the Bay Area. So yeah, I come from France.
A good mix from France to the Bay. So today we're going to be talking about Amphi. What is Amphi for the audience that haven't heard about this? What is it you're working on and building in the new company?
Yeah, Amphi is a low-code Python-based ETL to make it short. So low-code meaning it's a graphical ETL, extract, transform, and load. Basically, as an analyst or data scientist or data engineer, you would develop your pipelines visually and create your pipelines with a graphical interface. And the main difference with other traditional ETLs is based on Python. So when I was working at Talent, I noticed this shift from the Java ecosystem to the Python ecosystem for data engineering. And so my goal with Amphi is to offer a low-code Python-based ETL so that it can address modern use cases. It can leverage all the Python libraries out there, the AI, ML, Python libraries, so that we can do pipelines using AI and all the great libraries out there.
Oh, that's amazing. And does Amphi stand for something?
Not really. I mean, I have my own explanation. Basically, Amphi means duality, and I wanted to build a tool that can run on-prem, in the cloud, in a hybrid approach, etc. It generates Python code that you can deploy anywhere. So basically, Amphi meant the duality of what you can do with it, but it's abstract.
Oh, that's nice. It's always good to have some context around those names. And you actually answered a question I was going to ask, which is about the go-to-market, the pricing strategy, the deployment for Amphi. You touched on that a little bit, but if you want to unpack that for the audience, how Amphi works if they want to get access to this.
Yeah. So first of all, Amphi is really young. So I started the project a few months ago, 7 months ago. I released the first version on March and the second version in June. It's an open source software that you can install on your laptop or server. So it's open source and it's based on another open source software that is well known, which is called a Jupyter Lab. So basically, Amphi is a layer on top of Jupyter Lab. And the reason is Jupyter Lab is great for working with Python environments for data scientists. So what I did is create a set of extensions to extend Jupyter Lab, create a new interface, a new experience for data engineers, data scientists, and analysts to create those visual data pipelines.
Oh, that is amazing. And I know the audience are always curious to see what Amphi is. Do we have a demo to show for the team?
Yes, of course.
All right.
You can see my screen. So this is the Amphi. So maybe I'll show you how you can install it later. But for now, we will just jump right into it. When you start Amphi, you have this view. If you're familiar with Jupyter Lab, it might look like it. On the left, you have the file browser. Basically, you can just share like a folder or your file system, and you would have access to all your files on the left. And in the middle, you have the main view. Um, let's go into the pipelines. I have all my list of pipelines that I already created, but I will create a new one just to show you. When you click on new pipeline, you have this Canva. It's pretty typical for graphical ETL. You have a Canva, and on the right, you have the list of components that you have access to, right? And of course, you have inputs, you have transforms, and you have outputs, and a couple of other components, of course. So I'm just going to show you a quick example of what you can do. I'm going to drag and drop a CSV file, right? And you just have to drag and drop everything. So either files or components. And then if you want to look at a file, you can just, for each component, run it. So you have two buttons here, the settings and the run button. So I'm going to just go ahead and click on the run button. And once you run a component, you have access to a sample in what I call the pipeline console, right? And typically what you would do is add more components, you would link them, and you would continue your pipeline like that, right? So what I did is I prepared two pipelines for you today for the demo. One typical pipeline, which is what I call data manipulation or file data manipulation, and another pipeline, which is a RAG pipeline. So let's start with the traditional data manipulation pipeline.
And while you pull that up, what sources do you support? I'm guessing a library of connectors for RDBMSs,
Yeah,
Flatpak, C, maybe touch
yeah.
on that.
So Amphi is really young, so we don't have a wide range of connectors, but I think we have the basics here. Of course, we have all the types of files. We also have a few databases, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and SQL Server, which are the main ones. In terms of cloud data warehouse, we only have Snowflake for now. We'll add more later with BigQuery and in Azure, of course. And we also have some unstructured inputs. So I'll come back to the unstructured one later. But yeah, we have for now the basics for of what you would expect an ETL software, and we'll continue to add more connect. Yeah, same
And
for the outputs.
okay, just to double click on that, for these connectors, are those all built? Is your vision to build the connectors, or is there a framework where the community can contribute to some of these connectors and accelerate that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a question I've been asked a lot by the first users of Amphi. So the goal is for Amphi to be very flexible and extensible. I've actually yesterday had the first community based connector that have been pushed to the repo. So yeah, completely possible for people to collaborate and create components, community components. It's not well documented yet, but we'll try to document it better. Now I work with this person to create a new component, so I know better how it works, and yeah, I'll be able to document it. But that's the goal.
Oh, congrats on that. That's a milestone, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Oh yeah. So I wanted to first, I know it's a podcast, but I thought I would do like a use case on the Olympics. So I basically pulled two files, data files from the Olympics. A first file, which is the list of medals for each events. So let's can take a look at this one. So if I run this one, we can see that we have the list of all the medals that have been attributed, I think until yesterday. So for each event, we had the color of the medal, which is bronze, silver, and gold. And the other file I'm using is the list of athletes, right? And my goal in this pipeline is to manipulate the data so that I have the list of countries and the sum of all the medals for each countries. And we try to have the top medals by country, basically the table that we see on the news to compare all the countries. So we'll try to reproduce that. So what I did is I did a join data set component to join on the name. So on the name of the athletes to get the medals for each athlete. So as you can see, for each component, you still have this run button so that you can develop one by one and see the results as you develop.
That looks really cool. Reminds me a lot of talent from the talent days. When the run happens, where is that compute processing? Is that locally? Are you pushing
Yes.
to host a compute? How do you envision this being in production?
Yeah. So right now it's everything locally. So if you run it on your laptop, it's going to be the Python on your laptop. If you install it on a server, on an EC2 in AWS, etc., it's going to run on this machine. Of course, if you install it in AWS, EC2, yeah, multiple people can access it in the cloud, but still it runs locally. Future release will include running on other compute, remote compute, but maybe we can come back to that later because right now the pipelines are Python code, which is based on Pandas. So Pandas is a really known data frame library in Python. But for other future plans include to use IBIS. I don't know if you know IBIS, the data frame library IBIS.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a data frame library as well, but you can use it to run your Python code on Snowflake, on Spark. So basically, it's an abstraction layer on top of all the compute. So that would be the way for Amphi to defer compute to remote servers or platforms. But right now it's all locally. So I've joined the data sets for each athlete. I've joined and added the medal and all the details. And what I'm going to do is aggregate twice because I want to aggregate by event so that I have just one. Imagine sometimes we have teams of athletes that win just one medal, right? So we aggregate by event and country name so that we avoid to count them too many times. But I'm going to be quick on the aggregates, and then I'll use so I'm going to run this one. So after the aggregates, what we get is the list of country and the color of the medal and the count of each color, basically. So we have the count for each country of the gold, the silver, and the bronze medals. So now I'm going to use a pivot, really like in Excel, you can pivot the data so that you can get data in this format. For each country, you have a new column, bronze, gold, and silver. And the last steps, of course, is to sort all of that to see which country comes first, right? And I think for the Olympics, you first look at the gold and then silver and then bronze to do the ranking. So that's what I did. I did gold first, silver and bronze. And when you look at it, of course, the United States comes first with 30 gold medals, and then China with 27, and then Australia. I think it's not up to date.
Yeah.
It's from yesterday or the day before.
I love this idea of the components. Could you inject custom Python code to as well if the
Yes.
transformations get more complex?
Yeah, of course. So you have a custom code component that you can use, and you can write your own Python. You can import your own libraries. It can serve as an input, as a transform, or as an output. So it works in any cases. So yeah, of course, so I can show you right now. So as an output, I put a JSON file. So just to have a different format. Of course, we could have added a database or any other out. And the main difference with Amphi is that it generates Python code, right? So you have a button here, export to Python code. And when you do, you get the Python that has been generated.
Oh, that's pretty impressive. So you're generating the Python code. Can you go the other way around?
Yeah, that's a good question. You cannot right now. However, I'm already thinking about how you could do that. I think one interesting way to do it is using LLMs, because LLMs can understand the code, right? So if I give the LLM the right mapping of, capability to component, I think that would be possible. But right now it's unidirectional. It's graphical DSL that generates the Python.
Okay. And I know you're still early on in the development phase, but I'm guessing things like Git integration, CI/CD, which are table stakes requirements for enterprises, which will probably be your customers here, that those are things you're thinking about. Maybe you want to touch on that?
Yes, I'd like to. So one thing that is great is, as I said, it is based on Jupyter Lab, right? And Jupyter Lab is a really mature notebook software. Actually, there are a lot of extensions and plugins to Jupyter Lab, and I'm using the same extension management system. And there is a Git extension that is compatible with Amphi. So right now you could already use the Git extension to use Git with Amphi. I didn't put it by default, but if you want to do Git and use CI/CD, you could do it using the Git extension. And by the way, all the pipelines are defined as files. So everything is files with Amphi. So everything that you want, you can store in Git in a file system. That way, it's really great for CI/CD. So I'm trying to mix the best of both worlds of code and graphical, because you have the DSL, so the pipelines representation, which are just JSON, and you also have the Python, which is just regular Python. If you look at the code, it's just pandas. There is no requirement of other libraries or dependencies from Amphi. It's regular pandas.
That's pretty powerful. This reminds me of the ETL space, which I think you know pretty well from the talent and open source that was Java based. And
Yep.
then go to more of your Airbyte type of tools, and then the Five Trans and the Matillions. How do you see this playing in that landscape?
Yeah. So on one hand, you have all the traditional ETLs, Talent, Informatica, Pentaho, those were developed more than 15, 20 years ago in the Java ecosystem, right? And then you got modern ELT tools, Arbeit, Fivetran, etc. And the thing is, the traditional ETL, they're based on Java, and the whole data engineering space is shifting to Python. So for me, they'll have a hard time adapting to this new ecosystem, integrating this new ecosystem because they're based on Java. So the foundations are different. And on the other hand, the modern ELT are really great for one use case, usually, which is analytics, right? They load data into a data warehouse, and then you can do transformation. But I think they miss a lot of the other use cases that are available, which I call operational data integration. And you need ETL for that. And I think using nowadays, a lot of people are using Python or Python scripting. And what I think is there is a gap on the market on the Python ecosystem for graphical ETL that would serve for all the Python use cases nowadays in the modern data engineering space.
Okay, that's an interesting angle there. So not just the traditional way of extracting, loading data, and then transforming in your analytical platform. I think what you're going after is the transformation is part of the pipeline, and you can serve more operational, real-time, online type needs as well.
For example, a typical use case that the modern ELT tools don't address well is just file manipulation, for example. You wouldn't use a Fivetran or Airbyte just to do what I did, like a pipeline or where you want to join data sets like CSV file. You wouldn't do that with Airbyte or Fivetran. That's not their purpose, right? You use those tools to replicate data from APIs to a cloud data warehouse. So all those operational use cases that are still relevant, especially in the AI world. In the AI world, everything is files. LLMs are files. Unstructured data are files. So there is a need to manage all those operational. Nowadays, it's done using Python scripts, but there isn't a graphical tool to help with that.
Okay, that's a good angle there. And then touch on the LLMs piece and how you see that playing a role here. How do you see LLMs in the Gen AI revolution we're all experiencing?
Yeah, I think LLMs will have a lot of different impacts on the ETL and data engineering space. So there are obvious use cases that we already know and that some tools have already implemented. So of course, you can have an assistant to help you develop pipelines, right? So you would have an assistant on the left and you would ask your assistant, well, I want to do this and that, and it would automatically create the pipeline, right? The other is instead of having those components, you could have like LLM components and you would just describe your transformation and it will automatically create the Python that correspond to your transformation. The last way I see is the agents. So the agentic data pipelines that we don't see yet. And I will try to address with Amphi, but basically using agents. So agents are basically autonomous robots that perform tasks based on a goal, right? So if you want a typical example nowadays for agents is data scrapping from websites. So basically you would have an agent and you would tell, well, I want to get all the medals from the Olympics site, right? And it will automatically create everything to extract this data. So I think the data world will go towards agents as well. How and when, I don't know, but I think it will come pretty fast. And in the case of Amphi, agents will be, for example, instead of having a CSV file input, you would have an agent, like a data scraping agent. You will give the task to the agent and it will retrieve the data and will output the data as you ask. And you will use the agents like that. And you could think of agents as input, as output, and that transform as well, right? You can give tasks to a transform agent and it will do the transformation based on all metadata it has, etc.
I love that. I'm completely sold on the agentic future. It seems inevitable. How is that part of the roadmap already, or those are things you're still thinking and ideating around? How close are we to that in seeing that in Amphi?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I've done some testing on that. What I'm not sure yet is how to implement it. When you're doing an ETL or an integration tool, your goal is not to build everything, right? So typically when you do integration, you don't create the database. You don't create all the input and outputs, right? You just integrate with that. So I think I would do the same with agents. I would use external agents, right? So either via APIs, of course, but nowadays there are open source agents. So there are data scraping agents. There are structured output agents that you can use. So I would integrate with them. So I would use those open source agents and I would add them as inputs or outputs as components, basically. So that's my way of doing it. The ecosystem of agents is really young, right? It's not mature. So I think it will come in the next couple of months, probably.
Okay, really powerful. Let's switch gears here and talk about traction. So you clearly have this on GitHub, seeing a lot of GitHub stars continuously growing there. Talk about, are customers using this today? How do people use this if they wanted to try as you develop?
That's a good point, actually. So that's the GitHub repo. So yeah, it's open source. You can look at how you can install it. So it's a pip install and then Amphi start. So it's really easy to get started if you have Python installed on your machine. Now, today we have, 682 start, which is great. So we have a lot of users already. We have a Slack where users can share their pipelines and their feedback and their issues. I don't think there are people using it in production yet. It's not mature enough. However, I already have users doing real pipelines with it for their own use or in their company, but not pipelines scheduled in production. We're still in the beginning. The last version, major version, the beta version, was just released in June. So it's really recent. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the traction so far, all the feedback I get. But yeah, I hope it will continue.
Yeah, congratulations. That's pretty good to see the traction. And then how do you envision this? Would there be a SaaS component to it too as well for folks who maybe are not able to type in pip install on the local things?
Yeah, so definitely I have different options when it comes to monetization and basically the commercial strategy, right? A SaaS version is definitely one of these options. The thing is, if I want to do a SaaS version, I need to do it well. And I would need a team to be able to support that, right? Because a SaaS is pretty hard to do well, right? It depends on the future of Amphi and how it goes. Basically, if I can raise funds and build a team, etc. So that would be an option. Other options for the go-to-market would be to create paid components or set of components. You can imagine, premium components and you would pay to have them. And the third option would be to offer Amphi or specialized version of Amphi on cloud provider marketplaces, AWS Marketplace, Snowflake Marketplace, like that. So you would have tailored version of Amphi for those clouds on the marketplace. So that would be another option.
Okay, that's really powerful. Now let's maybe step back and then switch gears here and talk about your journey from being in the trenches and selling enterprise solutions like Talent at the time when we worked together to
Yep.
being an entrepreneur and actually launching Amphi and trying to build this project. How has that transformation been like? If there are any experiences there you can share.
Well, yeah, first of all, I've been wanting to do my own thing for a while. So we're thinking about that for a while. So I came in the US 3, 4 years ago. So I had a visa. So I had to wait to have a green card, etc. So I had this to take into account. And once I got my green card, I knew that I could actually do my own thing. So I left Talent and yeah, I already had that in mind that I wanted to do something. Quickly, this idea of the Python-based ETL came because I know the space very well. I had ideas on how to implement it, to implement my own ideas. So that was my main reason to start this. And, so far, I mean, I've been developing this alone. So I've done mistakes. I've pivoted on my idea a bit, but it's been fine every day coding and adding functionalities and features and just tried to get some traction. And funny enough, I didn't have any traction for a while. And someday someone posted Amphi on Hacker News. And suddenly I got some messages on LinkedIn and someone told me, well, congrats on your launch on Hacker News. And I was surprised because I didn't launch anything. Someone posted it on my behalf. And I think that's when it really started. I got a lot of stars coming from Hacker News, a lot of users, a lot of people putting issues, so testing the product, etc. So think that was the real sign of users being interested in them.
Yeah, that's always a motivation to get that validation from the community on that. And we're talking about Amphi now. I think you mentioned about 4 months in, 6 months in. Is that correct?
Yeah, like 7, 8 months total. But when you start, you
Mm.
consider all the options, what you want to build, etc. But yeah, the first version, which was very rudimentary, was on.
March. Okay. So let's go with the 8 months into this. I'm very curious. And I love this when talking to founders and seeing the progression and the growth in their product. Where do you see, if we have this conversation a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what is that vision for what you see Amphi being and where would that be?
Yeah. So in 1 year, hopefully we'll have a small team supporting this great product. We have a few customers and a lot of open source users. We would have the open source core product that would be used by a lot of people. And I hope we'll have this commercial piece that you can add to Amphi. So I think that that would be ideal. And yeah, a few customers, which is great, and a small team behind.
Okay. And do you see an acquisition play here potentially? You don't have to talk about it,
No,
but
not really. Not
mm,
that now.
that's awesome. And then for folks who want to try this, it's fascinating. Python is definitely where people are at when it comes to data for data scientists, for machine learning experts. How could they find you? Obviously, the link to the GitHub repo will be available, but how could they find you? What would you recommend for folks who want to try this or reach out?
Yeah. So you can reach out on LinkedIn. So Thibaut Gourdel, you can reach out there. You can create issues. So if you test Amphi, you see issues, you have suggestions for features, don't hesitate to create issues on GitHub. We have the Slack community. So you can come on the Slack community, ask questions to the community, anything. And that's pretty much it, I guess.
Awesome, Thibaut. And we're going to leave links to all of this, all the resources, links to contact Thibaut, links to the GitHub repo too as well in the description below for anyone who wants to be in and trying out. So any last words for the audience,
Yeah,
Thibaut?
no, that's fine. I think we covered pretty much everything. I had this other pipeline I wanted to show, but I think
Oh,
we
go
do not
for
have
it.
the time.
Yeah, we can jump
Oh,
in if you want to show that.
I
Mm.
had this data manipulation pipeline, but I had another pipeline that I had prepared, which is a RAG pipeline. We take a look at it. It's a pretty simple pipeline. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Basically, when you use an LLM and you want to have accurate responses based on private data. So, LLM are really general in their knowledge. And if you want to ask questions and that they base their response on private data, on specific data, you will use a RAG approach. And how it works is you have a vector store. So the vector store is a representation of data as vectors. And basically, when you ask your question, the RAG system will retrieve the relevant pieces of data from the vector store. And then the LLM will read this relevant piece of data and create a response based on this data. So basically, you will get more accurate responses because it will base its response on real data coming from like a knowledge base. And to do that, you have this ETL piece. Of course, you need to extract the information you want to store in the vector store. And there are a few different steps that you have to do is you have to chunk the data. So basically, if you have a text, you have to chunk it to have smaller pieces so that when you ask your question, it only retrieve the small pieces relevant to your question. So that's called the chunking. And then you have the embedding. So the embedding is transforming this piece of data. So for example, a sentence into a vector that you store in the vector database. And that's basically what we do in this pipeline. So I have this Reddit file, CSV file. So it's going to install a few more packages here. But yeah, so I have this file. So basically extracting comments from Reddit, from a Reddit post, and it's on Streamlit. So I'm sure you know Streamlit very well.
No, really, really well. UI
Yeah.
your applications.
So it's basically someone on Reddit asking is if Streamlit is production ready, how it is, etc. And on Reddit, people are really harsh. So they give their opinion. And I have all those comments on Reddit. So I have 37 comments so it's not a lot. It's a demo. So this is still structured data. And when you deal with vector stores and Gen AI application, usually you don't deal with table format data, you deal with documents. And I have a component to convert to docs. So docs is, in the Python, when you deal with structured data, you deal with data frame in Python. And when you deal with Gen AI application, you deal with documents or all, length chain, llama index, like that. The unit is the document. So this component convert the structured data into a document based on a main column. So the main column, obviously, is the common body. That's the text. And it will take all the other columns as metadata. So we can take a look at this one. It's going to install a few packages as well. So it uses a LangChain behind the scene.
Okay.
So that's the formats of documents. So you have a body, like a main content, which is your text. And then you have the metadata that you can use for filtering for a lot of different uses. So I have all my comments, and then we'll do the chunking to have different strategy for chunking. I'm using here a recursive chunking, which is a really common way to do chunking. So I'm chunking using the space, and anti-character, double new line, single new lines. This type of recursive chunking is really common when you deal with regular text. So if I do that and then choose my chunk size and chunk overlap, so those type of parameters, usually you just test along the way, and you do your optimization along the way. So that's why having a graphical tool like Amphi is really great, because you can test it graphically. You don't have to code it all the time. All right, so I'm going to run this one, and once it's done, we can then send all the documents to a vector store. So here I'm using Chroma, which is open source, and we can use it locally. But you have a really well-known vector store like Pinecone, which is a hosted service. Nowadays, a lot of platform offer a type of vector store. So yeah, Snowflake, all the cloud providers probably as well. So I'm going to run my pipeline and send all those. So as you can see, I have 42 documents now. So the chunking actually created new documents, right?
What I'm curious to see is, what does that code behind the Python code behind looks like? And I'm guessing, could you see folks using this as the GUI for generating code, then copying that code and using to orchestrate in Airflow or some other orchestrator?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely. I think that I'm using LangChain, which is, I think, the main popular frameworks nowadays. So I think they are LangChain and Llama Index are the two most common. So yeah, if you do export to Python code, you can see I'm using LangChain, and I'm pretty much doing regular LangChain code here. So you can definitely either copy paste the code in Airflow to schedule it, etc. So that's one way to do it. Or you can, I think the main use case for now, because it's not sure enough, but it's to test. So as I said, finding the right parameters, the right optimization can take a long time. So using a graphical tool with the development and the speed of developing such pipeline. But yeah, the goal would be then to use it in production to new data and have better LLM response using RAG. So just to finish, I had this Streamlit app. Now, I'm going to ask the question, is Streamlit production ready? And for now, I'm not using RAG. I'm going to use the regular LLM, which is OpenAI. And yeah, the LLM says, yes, Streamlit is production ready, etc. So it's great. Now using RAG, it's going to retrieve those documents. So based on the question, it retrieved four comments. Right? And based on those comments, the answer changed. It says no now. So just so you know, I wouldn't trust that, of course, but it's just to show you that you can influence your response using RAG, etc. But yeah, I think Streamlit is quite production ready.
Yeah. What settings do we have for automation of that in terms of do you have a cron scheduler or an event-based scheduler that allows, as new data comes in, to trigger the workflow, the process?
Yeah, so that's one of the area that I need to really work on. So there is no scheduler. The only way right now is, since you can export the Python code, you can use the code, simple like Python file using Airflow or a cron on your laptop. All the Linux or Windows, you can use cron as well. but there is no way to do it natively yet. It's going to come really, really quick. We'll have a built scheduler and like a simple orchestrator quite soon in the interface to do that. So that will be better. Right now, you have to deal with the scheduling yourself, either using orchestrator or a crowd.
Very powerful. And then last question before I see if you have other questions. Apache NiFi, ever heard of that?
Of course.
How does this compare, contrast with that for someone who maybe looks at this and say the interface looks the same?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, you'll find similarities in terms of interface. I think
Mhm.
the main difference would be as with the traditional ETL, it's based on Java. It's been developed in Java. So even though I think they just released recently like a Python component, it still means that they'll run like a Java, a JVM, and then a Python ecosystem at the same time. I think it's really enterprise ready, enterprise oriented. It's great for real-time flow, but it's not pure Python. So the main difference with Amphi is pure Python, and you can export the Python yourself. And if you have the Python code, you can deploy it anywhere. You can deploy it in a container. You can deploy it in AWS Lambda, for example. Also, the flexibility of being able to deploy this Python code anywhere is where the main
Uh,
difference lies.
that was really good. So thanks for that. I think it's always important to orient where things do fit. Now, I know we had a little bit of a false start there, but any last words for the audience?
Yeah, the last words would be if you're interested, please try it. It's free to try. Just go to the GitHub, look at the installation instructions, pip install and Amphi start. Don't hesitate to give me feedback and ask questions. Give me a GitHub star if you can, and that would be great.
Absolutely. Everyone give Thibaut the GitHub star, doing some fascinating work there. Well, Thibaut, this has been very insightful, at least to me, getting to see this. Thank you for coming on board the demo hub. We'd love to see how this progresses and where you take this. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Awesome. Thanks, Thibaut.